Welcome, everybody, to our podcast. And I want to introduce my co-author and co-founder, Leah Haynes, who is a doctor, and Kevin Caldwell, who is a maven. Kevin is the structural head of our software development, and he is probably one of the more interesting fellows in the world of game design. And I know a little bit about that, so therefore I can opine with great clarity. But so we're going to talk a little bit about our game, about the theory, and what we want to accomplish. And so I'll turn it over to Leah for a minute, and then she'll do a further introduction of Kevin.
Right. Well, Kevin's executive producing the game, and I think of what he's written to outline the game as a sci-fi novel, which is interesting, exciting, and so far the kids that have tested it with us agree with my conclusion that it is exciting and engaging. Kevin, do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself and your background, and then we'll jump into the game?
Sure. One of the things that I enjoy most is talking about myself. Not really at all. Yeah, so my name's Kevin. I've been in the games industry now for over 15 years. I spent some time in AAA game development, esports, and then, for about 7 years of that, 15 has been in ed tech and game-based learning. Had an opportunity to work on ABC Mouse for Age of Learning, which was where I think I first cut my teeth and first developed a passion for everything to do with games and learning. And it really gave me a unique perspective on my own past and history with gaming. And have been able to reflect, in now 15 years on my gaming experience as a kid and all the things that I was able to learn and sort of develop, expertise around through games and in games. And so, really excited to be here and to join you both.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm curious, and I think it would be interesting for our audience to know because I know you started your own ed tech project in the past, and so what lessons from that experience have you brought into ExoDexa?
Ooh, starting off strong. That was a really interesting experience. Our focus with that company, Evolve to Play, was on children 6 to 9, and it wasn't really. We didn't start out that way. We started with more of a broad. Let's start testing 4 to 13 and kind of see where this game and some of the game mechanics that we were testing really were going to net out, and through a lot of research and development, we ended up focusing in on 6 to 9 year olds. And one of the things one of the things that was most prominent for me in that experience was the different levels of literacy that we began testing with at younger ages, especially in sort of 4 to 6, where we initially were looking. Kids have wildly different skills at that age, right? They have different experiences, different life experiences, different technology, media experiences, and I really gained just a deep appreciation for the necessity to bring everyone along for the ride in a consistent way. And so, there's this adage at Blizzard, where was my first studio that I worked at, which was, easy to learn, difficult to master. And I believe that goes back even to perhaps Nolan with Atari and some of his work. I ended up seeing some history at one point on a Wikipedia page, I think, about where that came from. And, that learning curve, or the sort of learning progression that kids at that age need is everything from how to interface with the game, how to read different bits of information about the game, how to introduce new concepts, and really kind of going towards how do you develop a discourse around your game that a young child can latch onto, can learn, can repeat. And I think that was that's going to stay with me forever, is just like go in with no assumptions that a player has any idea of how to interface with your game and how to play your game. And certainly, if you think about how we've been developing through ours, it's really been from that, okay, that just sort of base assumption of let's try to assume that nobody knows anything about what we're doing, and bring them along for the ride.
Yeah, I always like the concept of it has to be intuitive, but then they leave out the last part of that sentence, and it's to whom.
Right.
Yeah, and that design empathy is really difficult as an adult who's got 20, 30 years of just like pull yourself out of all of the information and the know-how that you have, and to start at really square zero.
Yeah.
It's tough.
So where do you see the strength of ExoDexa? What do you think is our best shot?
The approach that we've taken in sort of being student first, and I know this is something that you both wrote about in the book, and really have emphasized with the founding of ExoDexa. That I don't know, like it's sort of student player first in my mind, right? Because the kids that are going to be coming in, they're not just students, they're players of our game, and they're not just students or players, they're kids. And so it's like a kid first. And I think that is such a profound place to begin, this project and this company, that really is different than some of the companies that I've worked for in the past, and certainly some of the school experience that I've personally had in the past, which have always felt a bit, administrator first or parent first, even, right? Like there's always this focus on the teacher or the parent, and it's like, well, wait a minute, like what about my needs? And certainly, reflecting on a lot of the, just school policies and administration that we've seen in the States. It doesn't really feel like it's student, player, kid first. And I think that's going to be a really sort of distinguishable difference in, what kids and parents will be able to see when they get involved with our game.
So many, even like the federal standards of STEM and things like that, where I waxing eloquent on the future, it's so clear to me that most of the jobs, by the time these kids graduate from high school, are going to be different. So
Yeah.
what do they need to know?
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think the answer to that is, Kevin? What do they need to know?
I mean, I'm fully in on just I mean, when I founded Evolved Play prior to joining ExoDexa, right, like there was a real emphasis that I believed and developed to my core, which was like relationship skills, right? And how do you relate to another person? How do you communicate, and how do you relate to yourself? And I think our prime focus is problem solving, and critical thinking. And I think there's a bit of both in how we're developing this project, and some of the stories and the narrative that we want to tell that bring in certainly aspects of relationship. How does our player relate to the world that they're encountering? How they relate to their encountering, and certainly a lot of the the ways that we're trying to present these characters and these NPC factions and peoples that are inhabiting our world. They're really focused on maintaining this relationship with the world that they're living in, and they're wanting to teach the players about that. But as it relates to problem solving and critical thinking, like Nolan just mentioning about what are these skills that we need to be teaching these kids, and what are these jobs that they're going to be, and these careers and these lifestyles that they're going to be getting into, like that's going to change rapidly. I mean, what we've been seeing in the last 5 years, an individual coming into into their adult life today is going to need a lot of problem solving and a lot of critical thinking to be able to answer that for themselves as the technologies change, as we see the proliferation of AI just kind of fundamentally change what we have experienced in our lifetimes. And my daughter's 4 now, and I'm like, okay, I really want her to think about, hey, how do you solve this problem, and how do we overcome our frustrations? And that's one of her things right now. She gets really frustrated about something. It's like, hey, let's come back from it for a second. Let's look at it. Let's critically think about what we're trying to do, and try to take a different perspective on it. And she's right now she's getting really into. She has these magnet tiles that are have little magnetic connecting strips, and I think for the first 3 years that we've had them, it's been me building and her sort of watching. And I've been really pushing her now to build while I'm watching, and now she's just like building and building and building. She built a little Harry Potter castle the other day, and that was purely creative. Like we're reading some of the Harry Potter books to her at night, and she just was like, "Hey, Dad!" And she comes knocking on my door. Look at this, castle that I just built, and I'm like, "What? This is so cool!" And then I don't know, she just built something else today, and she knocked on my door. Come look, and I'm amazed at how my wife and I's helping her solve these problems and think about these things that she's doing, and gaining these skills is just turning into rapid creativity and sort of runaway creativity, excuse me.
Wonderful. The first thing you mentioned there about relationships, I just finished a book called Future Proof, which is about how AI is going to impact the careers of the future. And that was the main point. What will save people in all industries, even the ones that AI is going to take over, will be the relationships, because people still, at least in all of the research so far, people still prefer to deal with another human over a machine. So I think that, but absolutely the problem solving, and we are going to be leaving this generation with a ton of interesting problems to find their way through. So that's a big one, and just critical and creative thinking. So I completely agree.
I actually kind of disagree a little bit. I would much prefer to have a customer service rep be AI and fast, rather than being online for 2 hours and getting some idiot.
Well, I do think that there are some areas where that's absolutely true. But when it comes to, I don't know, what the examples they used were accountants. Like, for the most part, the accounting business is going to go to AI. But the accountants who have relationships with their clients that are positive relationships, they're still preferring to deal with a human over AI. And that may be transitional. It's all pretty new, and there are a lot of people, in our generation, maybe Nolan, you and me, where they're not technical, where they have not, my father used to say, "Don't .com me." He had no computer, he had no interest in learning it, and that was his, like, "No, sir, I'm gonna make a phone call."
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
But remember where Arnold Schwarzenegger in Total Recall got into the Johnny Cab, and there was this guy that was the Johnny Cab going along, and he ended up ripping him out. The question is, would you rather have a Johnny Cab or have an Uber driver?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, and when I think about relationships, it's not necessarily in relation to those sorts of moments. And that's an interesting sort of question. I think that's kind of a utility, right? Like, okay, get me to place A to B, and like, just let me mind my own business and do what I want. But my career and my personal life is built on relationships, right? I think most of the jobs that I've gotten have been through referral, somebody that I've known that knew somebody else that was looking for a thing. And when I reflect back on my high school experience and my middle school experience, and certainly my college experience, I didn't really value those relationships in the way that I perhaps should have, knowing how important they would have been later in life. And when I think today, about my daughter and some of the, I want nothing more for her than to invest in those relationships and to grow those relationships and to make them permanent. And I don't know if that's just in sort of coming out of COVID and being sort of a completely remote worker now for 4+ years. I feel at times like a bit of an island, right? And as we see technology continue to go the direction that it's going, where do people find that community and those relationships beyond those fundamental sort of years of schooling? And that's kind of what worries me about the opportunities that kids will or will not have based on who they know and how they've maintained their relationships.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we should wrap up this conversation, but Kevin, will you come back and talk to us about the actual game next?
Sure.
Okay. So don't go away.
That's a problem. We like to wax eloquent, and a lot of times this view from 10,000 feet is so much more fun than getting down and wrestling in the mud.
I've been wrestling in the mud since our auditor was dismissed, so I like being up here for a bit. So thank you all for being with us, and please come back. We're going to talk to Kevin about the game for ExoDexa.
Cool.